Moniquita de mi vida, tráeme poco de ceviche, tiradito amarillito, no te olvides de los mitos, saltadito calentito, ay qué rico, Moniquita. Ay qué rico, Moniquita. Dulcecito picarón, solo dame corazón. Ay de limón, para curar todo el dolor. Tamalito madrugón, chirimoya pero alegre. No se olviden del pollito, con su arrocito verde. Sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita, Moniquita de mi vida. Dame toda tú, sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita, Moniquita de mi vida. Dame toda tú, sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita, Moniquita de mi vida. Dame toda tú, sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita. Yo nunca me sentí solo, me acompañas desde niño, me acompañas desde niño y aunque parezca muy poco, déjame cantarte, déjame pedirte perdón, perdón, por ser un niño, por no comer, por no dormir, perdón, perdón, por ser un niño. Dame toda tú, sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita, Moniquita de mi vida. Dame toda tú, sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita, dame toda tú, sazón limeña, Moniquita, Moniquita, dame toda tú.
Good morning, everyone. All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for joining us today for our spring installment of the Leela Benson Digital Scholarship in the Americas Speaker Series. Each year, the Leela Benson Digital Scholarship Office showcases the work of scholars who are engaging digital lenses to innovate scholarship on Latin American, US Latinx, African diaspora, and indigenous studies. Today, I have the distinct and great pleasure to introduce Dr. Patricia Murrieta-Flores, who will share with us a collaborative project she leads titled Digging into Early Colonial Mexico, a large-scale computational analysis of historical documents. Applying machine learning technologies onto the Relaciones Geográficas de Nueva España, or the Geographic Reports of New Spain corpus, Dr. Murrieta-Flores and her international team are designing computational methods to extract and analyze geographic data. Their goal is to identify possible large-scale historical patterns and create the first 16th-century digital gazetteer of Mexico and Guatemala. Dr. Patricia Murrieta-Flores is the co-director of the Digital Humanities Hub and senior lecturer in Digital Humanities at Lancaster University in the United Kingdom. She holds a doctorate in archaeological computing from the University of Southampton, and her research focuses on the different aspects of space, place, and time using a range of technologies such as geographic information systems and natural language processing. Besides leading the Digging into Early Colonial Mexico project, she is also a principal investigator, co-investigator, and collaborator in multiple projects funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, the Economic and Social Research Council, and the Paul Mellon Center for Studies in British Art at Yale University. She has also written numerous articles and edited and contributed to several books on the digital humanities, cultural heritage, and spatial humanities. There are too many to name here, so for a full listing of Dr. Murrieta's work, I am going to paste her ORCID ID in the chat for you to peruse. Give me 1 second. There it is. And without further ado, I present to you Dr. Patricia Murrieta-Flores. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Albert. First of all, I will really like to thank you for the invitation. And of course, I'm quite honored to, be the starting this series, particularly with the digital exhibition that you have put together. And I'm very excited to be here. So let me just go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Can you see that okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Right. So just a bit about my background. As Albert already said, I work in digital humanities, but I'm also originally an archaeologist. And I work many years back in Mexico this is the country from which I am, of course. And I worked back there for many years for the National Institute of Anthropology and History before I came to the UK to do my postgrad studies. And in Mexico, I work in historical archaeology, particularly focusing on the early industry of sugar, on the colonial plantations, basically, and haciendas of the 16th century. But previous to that, I did, with a dear professor of mine, Javier Lopez Camacho at the National School of Anthropology and History, the mapping of archaeological sites in Quintana Roo. And I also did substantial work in the Archaeological Atlas of Chiapas when I worked at the INA Center there. There are a series of points why I'm telling you this, but this work basically closely related to mapping and more specifically observing settlement patterns and so on, led me to develop a strong interest in geographic information systems and more specifically to think carefully about the influence of social aspects in the development of places, and also to reflect quite substantially on the meaning of the landscape. And so at the same time that I was developing all this, I had always been quite technologically minded. And so I found this fantastic program in archaeological computing at the University of Southampton, where I did my master's in science, and I ended up doing also my PhD in computational applications to archaeology. And this was quite a long time now. But while I was doing that, I'm especially working with geographic information systems. Sorry, I'm kind of assuming that you all know what this is. But for those of you that don't, if you have used Google Earth, for instance, or Google Maps, you have in effect already used geographic information systems. But the difference with professional GIS software and things like Google Maps or Google Earth is that beyond mapping, for instance, you can carry out all sorts of spatial analysis with any kind of geographic information. And this kind of software basically has the amazing capacity of holding thousands of pieces of information and analyze them as well. And so one of the first thoughts that I had at some point while I was doing my PhD and learning particularly about this technology was precisely the need for the kind of work that Javier Lopez and others were doing in terms of mapping and recording Mesoamerican sites and so on, but specifically for the colonial period. Anyway, so time passed and I deviated quite substantially from early colonial history for a series of different reasons. And in the way I basically learned and developed a bunch of quite useful skills, basically, and things. And one of these things was related to the work that I did with Ian Gregory and our team at the Spatial Humanities Project. And we developed a methodology called geographical text analysis. So I'm going to talk about this method later today, but at that time, when we were doing still the Spatial Humanities Project, I was starting to develop a strong focus on computational methods, basically to analyze information contained within historical sources. And what geographical text analysis in short basically allows you to do is to identify, extract, and then analyze geographic information from written sources. And then while we were actually carrying out that in CIA, this is a wonderful conference called Computer Applications and Quantitative Methods in Archaeology, I encountered a good friend of mine, Diego Jimenez Vadillo, who works also at the National Institute of Anthropology and History in the Museum of Templo Mayor. And we started talking about this idea of geographical text analysis and the need of having an historical gazetteer of Mexico. Because one of the things that we know about works in historical geography in Mexico and historical archaeology, particularly in Mexico, is that this relies substantially in local and contained case studies, which are, of course, necessary, but it is quite difficult to do analysis at larger scales, not only due to the complexity of early colonial settlements because of the reconfigurations and historical circumstances that made settlements, disappear, shift, move, and so on, but also because often to gather substantial information in one place is a task of a lifetime, right? So today I want to talk about two projects, although we advertised basically in the summary that I was going to talk about digging into early colonial Mexico. I want to talk actually about two projects that have been designed with this specific problem in mind. So not only to gather substantial amounts of information, but also how to possibly analyze this at a landscape scale with computational techniques. And I hope that you find this interesting. So the projects that I'm going to talk about today are called Digging into Early Colonial Mexico, a large-scale computation and analysis of 16th century historical sources. And the second one is called Unlocking the Colonial Archive, Harnessing Artificial Intelligence for Indigenous and Spanish American Collections. The first one we started in 2018, and we are about to finish it now in September this year. And the second, Albert will be familiar with it, and we will talk about it in the final part of this talk. But we just started this project this February, and we are very excited about, and I will tell you more about this in a second. So the Digging into Early Colonial Mexico project was supported by the Transatlantic Platform of Humanities and Social Sciences, where three research councils in our case were involved. These were the ESRC in the UK, CONACYT in Mexico, and FCT from Portugal. We had 15 researchers involved in different capacities, and the partners were the Digital Humanities Hub and the History Department at Lancaster University, the Department of Computer Science from the University of Lisbon, and the Museum of Templo Mayor at the National Institute of Anthropology and History of Mexico. Now, the focus of this specific project was mainly threefold. So we wanted to create a series of computational approaches that will allow us to capture information at a larger scale from historical primary sources in what we could call a big data style. And we also wanted to develop methods to analyze this data. And in doing so, obviously answer also a series of interesting historical questions that are still out there related to the issues, particularly of the Altepetl, and changes in settlement pattern from what we call the Mesoamerican post-classic into the early colonial periods. And so in order to do so, we focus the project on a single but complex historical source. And so being basically interested in these aspects of space and place, the first historical source that comes to mind in terms of early colonial Mexico is the collection of the Relaciones Geográficas de Nueva España. This is to say the geographic reports of New Spain. And the reason for selecting this specific source is because directly or indirectly, whether you are interested in the Mesoamerican, particularly the post-classic or the colonial world, almost all research for some parts of Mexico, such as all central Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, Oaxaca, for instance, Michoacán, and so on, and of course, Guatemala as well, will touch at some point in the information contained in the Relaciones. Now, I don't want to assume that all of you know what the geographic reports of New Spain are, but for those of you that don't know, the geographic reports of New Spain are one of the major sources of information for the colonial period. This constitutes basically a massive compilation of information that was gathered between 1577 and 1585. And that is very much product of a questionnaire that Philip II, who was the Spanish king at the time, ordered. And the questionnaire had the aim to compile all sorts of information regarding the colonies of the Spanish realm, including the Viceroyalty of New Spain. Now, the history behind the compilation of these historical sources is really fascinating. I'm not going to have time to go into it. There were several attempts of questionnaires basically before that, before this one, sorry. But the great importance of this particular corpus is that it contains thousands of pages of information about the situation of both the American and the Spanish communities at the time. So the questionnaire is created by the chronicler cosmographer of the Indies at the time, Juan López de Velasco, and the final version of it contained basically 50 questions in total. And so the kind of information that this questionnaire collects is really important because the corregidor or the alcalde normally gather typically a group of within their office that will usually include indigenous elders, for instance, and nobles that provide quite detailed local information for each of these places. Of course, this didn't happen in all the cases, but the collection certainly amasses a huge amount of data that talks about people, traditions, religion, government, military organization, language, and of course, natural resources and so on. So there is information, as you can see in this slide, about climate, geography, the types of commerce that happened in the region, previous relationships with neighboring towns as well, information on plants, on diseases, how to cure these diseases, you name it. It's an amazing resource. And in addition to the written part of the reports, there was also a request to accompany these questionnaires basically with as much information as possible on the geographies and place names, actually in Spanish, but also in the local languages with further explanations on what place names, for instance, meant, details on the local geography, and so on. And within the mandate, basically, there is also a question that asks to provide maps of each individual place that the questionnaire was gathering. So a fantastic set of maps and cartographical outputs also emerged from the compilation of this information. And quite interestingly, the same as the information, this was done in a format that sometimes combined the indigenous and the European knowledge, basically, and style. So we can say without hesitation, really, that this is an invaluable resource for the study of the colonial period in America. Now, the corpus that we have is actually incomplete. So we don't know yet the total number of documents in existence, and we have certain knowledge of the ones corresponding to the North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean, but we know really little about the Philippines. The majority of documents known in the collection belong to the territory of New Spain, which includes, as you probably know, Mexico and Guatemala, in this particular case for the collection. But we haven't found anything yet on the northern borderland or what is today parts of Texas, California, and Florida. And most of the research looking to trace down these documents basically took place in the 19th century. And so many of these reports are actually lost. But several scholars, as I said, during the 19th century made this great effort to compile this information. And there has been seminal works around this resource explaining precisely what they are and the quantification of these documents and so on in the works of Howard Klein, for instance, and Peter Gerard. But what we know is that today there are 168 textual reports and 78 maps that actually survive. The whole corpus has almost 3 million words on it, and it covers the region that you can see basically in this map. And so just to give you an idea of what it covers around 50 provinces, 168 main jurisdictions or cabeceras, around 248 subordinate jurisdictions, more than 400 major towns, and more than 2,000 small towns and villages, just to give you an idea of the whole coverage of the reports. So if you think about it, this corpus contains at least one of the keys to continue the work of scholars such as James Lockhart, Charles Gibson, Pedro Carrasco, Peter Gerard, Howard Klein, and of course, more recently, Barbara Mundi, Federico Fernandez Preislev, Angel Garcia Zambrano, among many, many others, regarding the historical reconfiguration of the settlements or the Altepetl. So this is to say, basically having an in-depth look at the territorial organization in the colonial period. And this key relies precisely on looking at the colonial geographies also at a landscape level and at a larger scale. But of course, one of the challenges that you might have with this and with other historical sources for that matter, is that you have all this information in written records, but it is really hard as a human just to hold all this information and make sense of it. And of larger scales as well, or patterns, if any, right? And this is where technologies come in very handy. So the first thing that we set up to do in the Digging into Early Colonial Mexico project was the creation of the first digital 16th century historical gazetteer of Mexico. And in order to do that, we needed to identify and assign coordinates to all the places basically that are mentioned within these historical sources. And this is really easy to say, but it is really hard to do. But we have actually did it. We compiled information for almost 15,000 place names in total, and this includes modern names, historical names, and all sorts of spelling variations. And also other important information, such as whether places were cabeceras, for instance, sujetos, and also other important information, whether they are related to other, basically, other places as well, and so on. And in order to gather all these, we use a vast number as well of different resources, and this included secondary sources, primary sources, but also databases, archaeological reports, and so on. And of course, this process required enormous labor and research that was carried out mainly by our brilliant postdocs, Mariana Fabila Vasquez and Raquel Liceras, and also one of my PhD students, Catherine Delamy. So it was an amazing collective effort. Now, of course, there are several challenges when you are creating an historical gazetteer, but the primary two challenges are called linguistic disambiguation and geographic disambiguation. So this is to say that you need to solve problems such as that several places, for instance, may have the same name or spelling variations of that name. And also, once you have actually done the linguistic disambiguation, you also need to find out where the place actually was, right? But even with these problems, we identified the vast majority of these places, and for the 12 volumes of the Relaciones that exist, this is to say 10 volumes for the detailed collection that René Acuña basically published, and the 2 volumes for the Relaciones de Yucatán that Mercedes de la Garza publishes as well with UNAM. Also the Suma de la Visita de los Pueblos by Francisco del Paso y Troncoso, we accomplish a very high percentage of the identification of the majority of 16th century places. And in fact, some of these volumes were resolved 100%. So this is to say that we managed to find and assign coordinates to all the places mentioned in the historical sources. So this was precisely the case for the Relaciones de Yucatan, one of the volumes for Mexico, and so on. And so the result of this then is a massive historical gazetteer with these thousands of records available in Geographic Information Systems format that you can input if you wish into Google Maps, for instance, or Google Earth. And of course, also you can, because it is available in Geographic Information Systems, you can do all sorts of advanced spatial analysis from this. But in addition to this, we also created an online database that we are finishing up now at the moment, and that has the facility for you to search all sorts of information behind each of the places that we recorded, but also to input information into it. Because this work with historical gazetteers is actually work that you never finish, right? And so we want also people to continue developing the gazetteer as well. And so if you are at any point interested in contributing to this aspect of the project or any other aspects, I'll be more than happy to include you, as part of it and to work on this and so on. Now, in addition to, or at the same time as we were basically precisely creating the gazetteer, we had to define a method to find disambiguate and create all this spatial data. And from that, we developed a really interesting model, I think, that can work as well for the development of other historical gazetteers. We did the collection, as I said before, of place name variations and so on. And we also integrate with this information from secondary and primary source data. We also took care of thinking about interoperability. This is to say that we want all the data sets that we create to be interoperable with other formats as well. And so we decided to use linked places format, which at the moment is one of the standards, let's say, within digital humanities, within linked data, in order to share this information. We also develop with these more than 70 layers of geographic information. So this is to say specific geographic layers that include information such as ecclesiastic and civil jurisdictions, among many, many other things, right? Now, once you have that, so all this information gathered, right? And it took us basically 3 years to develop all these resources. Something that we imagine and that we have been developing for a while was the capacity to take, let's say, a collection of hundreds or thousands of historical documents and mine information out from this in such a way that you could analyze not only documents and mine information out of this, but actually similar pieces, for instance, of information as such coming from different collections, right? But also those that are associated to particular geographies. So this is to say, we wanted to develop a method that will allow us to mine information that we are interested about from historical documents, but also possibly concepts of our interest, but also that can be related to the geographies that we are interested on. And so we developed a software from this method called geographical text analysis. But before I show you that, just for me to explain a bit more the technologies that we use related to this, I want to show you the ways in which we use artificial intelligence to identify and extract information from these documents. So the computational work that we are doing with natural language processing is very interesting. Now, for those of you that have never heard about natural language processing or NLP, this is a subdiscipline from computer science and artificial intelligence that basically aims to teach the computer how human language behaves and basically in written and spoken corpora. So what we are basically developing, and this is related and expands geographical text analysis, is a big data approach that allows the computer to identify, cross-link, and analyze information from corpora like the Relaciones Geográficas that otherwise, as I was saying before, it will take you a lifetime basically to explore. So for instance, one of the things that we are doing is teaching the computer to automatically identify certain pieces of information in a document, right? So let's say that I want to know who was involved in the collection of information within the geographic reports. And so with machine learning, which is a discipline within artificial intelligence and now natural language processing tools, particularly a technique called name entity recognition, I can teach the computer what is a proper name and how a proper name looks like in a document, right? Because the basis for that is that language behaves in a certain way. It has basically rules, and we can teach the computer how a proper name looks like, right? So once I have taught the computer that, it is now capable of identifying proper names in other documents that it has never seen, right? And so from this, I could identify all the people, for instance, that is mentioned in the Relaciones, and I could reconstruct the whole network of people that participated in the collection of these documents, which is something that at some point the project will do. And the same as we do proper names, for instance, we can also identify all sorts of different things, such as words, but these can be not only single keywords, but also complex concepts related to, for instance, topics, as I was saying before, that might be of your interest. So let's say you are interested on religion or places or economic resources, animals, plants, disease, and so on. And so you could actually simply identify these through the techniques that we are developing and extract information from this. And if you think about it, this is a very powerful way, not only in terms of how you will be searching information in historical documents. This is not by keyword, but by actual concept. And in addition to that, it will basically allow you also to cross-reference information across, for instance, thousands of books, where if you wanted to look for the mention of a particular disease and its relationship to, for instance, specific geographies, you can actually do so. So I'm going to show a little example in a few minutes, but this is, one of the things that we are quite excited about in terms of the development of computational approaches to corpora. Now, within this aspect of natural language processing, in order to do that, in order to carry out this kind of extraction of information at larger scale, we needed to design a model for the annotation of information, also to carry out geographical text analysis and extraction of information in general. So what we did, in effect, was to create or to identify what we can call a vocabulary or an ontology, where we identify particular concepts that were of our interest for extraction of information. And what we did was to teach the computer how these different categories, what kind of information goes into these different categories, such as, let's say, animals, architecture, climate, ethnic groups, dates, and so on, right? And then from there, as I said before, you can extract information according to these different concepts. And within these, we are also carrying out experiments with natural language processing in general, because it is relatively easy to extract proper names. Name entity recognition is a relatively easy task. And the reason is because, as I was saying before, there are rules specific for proper nouns, and they are relatively easy to identify. But when we are thinking about just regular nouns and so on, it becomes a bit more complex to teach the computer how to identify those, right? So there is quite a lot of experimentation at the moment that we are carrying out in order to fine-tune how the computer basically learns about these concepts that we are annotating. Now, A quite interesting relationship that we have is precisely with our partnership industry Tacto. So we have been carrying out precisely all these work with Tacto, which is a software company that has developed this fantastic online platform that allows you to annotate data in general. And they developed all this platform in the context of basically working with industry. So they work with car companies and all sorts of like big data companies in identifying specific bits of information in normally modern reports and so on. When we got in touch with them about this, they were quite excited about the project because it is such an unusual thing to do for them in terms of, they normally work with modern data. And so they were quite intrigued about what we were doing, and we established quite an interesting relationship in that sense. We have, in fact, carried out research together as well, and we ended up doing, for instance, the development of what we call, or they call, or the industry calls, inter-annotator agreement tool within their own platform. And what basically does, and why it was important for us to develop, was that if you think about it, when you are annotating particular concepts, let's say within an historical resource, you might have pieces of data that you annotate that are that you have no doubt whatsoever what they are. So, for instance, you might have things like animals, right? So a jaguar, I don't know, a lion, whatever that is, an insect, for instance, that you can be sure that if you add to that the tag of animal, you can't go wrong, right? It's an animal and everyone will be clear on that. But there are other concepts, for instance, that multiple annotators might be, different just because they are subject to interpretation, right? So in a particular case, for instance, if we are referring to an encomienda, let's say, it might be the case that depending on the context of the actual text, it might be referring to a geographic location, or it might be referring at actually the institution, right? So there might be, there not necessarily agreement between different annotators, right? And what the inter-annotator agreement measure basically does is precisely to measure how much do we agree when we annotate the same documents. So this was basically crucial to allow us to really understand how we can teach better the algorithms that are behind artificial intelligence in order for the computer to understand what we are trying to tag as particular concepts. And therefore, later on, the computer can be able to tag documents that have never seen before, right? And so there has been many challenges as well behind this. I'm presenting here the kind of like sanitized version of the thing. We have been, working with all these challenges, and I'm not going to have time to actually delve into it, but I will be happy to talk about this more if you want in the Q&A session. And so coming back to the geographical text analysis software that I was telling you about before, one of the ideas that we developed at the Spatial Humanities Project was the creation of a methodology combining natural language processing, corpus linguistics analysis, and geographic information systems. And the main idea behind this method was basically to teach the computer, firstly, identify those places that are mentioned in an historical source and assign coordinates to it. So this is a process that is called geoparsing. Then to identify those keywords or concepts, as I just showed you, that are of my interest. And then to run a query that will allow me to extract all sorts of information from not one, but thousands of historical records at the same time and present them in such a way that I can obviously do further analysis from this. And in such a way that I could, as I said before, extract information that is related to a specific geographies in the actual corpus. And this is exactly what we did with the geographical text analysis software. I have to say that we are still developing it, but it's going well. So these are actually screenshots of the tests that we are carrying out. And so in the geographical text analysis software, what you do is that you input a gazetteer, such as the one that I show you, and then an historical corpus annotated in such a way as I show you as well. And you can then run queries that can retrieve all those instances that mention the concept that is of your interest and whether this is related to a particular geography. So in the case here that you see in the screen, this is an example of a query looking for all those instances in the Relaciones corpus, looking for a type of disease that the Nueva call Pocolistia, right? So just to show you what exactly this is the output, let's say, of the Relaciones, sorry, of the geographic text analysis software, and it's basically looking at the whole corpus of the Relaciones. This is to say, at the 12th volume, looking for this specific, not only keyword, but also variations of this specific term. And what you have in each individual record is a sentence that includes this specific word, but that is also gives you information that is related to a specific place name within that, right? So this is in effect the word and the context in the sentence to the left and to the right. So this is a complete sentence, and it gives you also additional metadata or information that is of relevance, right? So it is telling you, for instance, that we mark this particular entity, or the computer marked this particular entity as health and with a tag called disease. And it also adds information that is important, such as where specifically, what is the volume basically where this mention is coming from, the position, for instance, in the text, and then the coordinates of the place that is specifically associated to this. And at the same time, this is in the spirit basically of the keyword in context, this kind of analysis that corpus linguistics basically does. And you can click, for instance, in one of these instances, and it will take you exactly to the text, to the part of the text where this instance is mentioned. And you can also export all this information into all sorts of different formats that can be of use, such as a CSV file. So you can put it in a spreadsheet, for instance, and you can also input it then into geographic information systems, so you can carry out all sorts of different analyses, right? And as I said, you can put these then into other different formats and so on. And what this gives you is a supercharged way to query complex information, to visualize it, and of course to also carry out, as I was saying before, spatial analysis from these. So among the first case studies we are carrying out in collaboration with other researchers, we are looking, for instance, precisely at a larger scale, how settlement patterns change over time, and also how the major epidemics happened, but particularly how they were spoken about in historical sources, and specifically in the Relaciones Geográficas corpus. Finally, regarding the Digging into Early Colonial Mexico project, we have created 2 electronic versions of the 12 volumes of the Relaciones Geográficas, and also the Suma de la Visita de los Pueblos. The first one is what we call a machine-ready corpus. So this is to say a clean version and without notes, basically, from editions. And these are in a format of simple TXT files. So this can be used basically for any computational process, corpus linguistics analysis, and so on. And the second version is the fully annotated corpus with the categories that you saw in the NLP example. So this can also be used for this kind of analysis that I was telling you before, to identify particular concepts or to extract information also from this. And all these resources, the gazetteer, the database, the software, and the corpora will be freely available, open source as well, and released of the year. And so the last thing that I want to talk about today is this new project called Unlocking the Colonial Archive. And I'll be brief because, as I said, we just started the project, but it is really exciting and quite promising. This is a collaboration that we are carrying out with, happily, with the Lila Svensson. So the PI in the US is Catherine McDonough, and the co-I is Albert Palacios. And here in the side of the UK, I am the PI, and Javier Pereda from Liverpool John Moores University is the co-I in the UK. And so this particular project is quite interesting. So I didn't mention the full title of it. So it's Unlocking the Colonial Archive, Harnessing Artificial Intelligence for Indigenous and Spanish American Historical Collections. And I think the development of this project will be quite interesting because it's tackling some of the most, I will say, challenging perspectives when working with colonial and Spanish historical sources from this perspective of computational approaches. And so, as you can see, well, the project is funded by the UKRI, by the HRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and the National Endowment for the Humanities in the UK. And so we have also very interesting partners, both academic and industry. So these include UNAM, BUAP, ENA, INA, the University of Alicante, the University of Lisbon, and on the side of industry, we have basically partnered as well with Transcribus, Tacto again, and we also are collaborating now with Lucentia Lab. Now, this project has as main objective, as the title actually says, to harness diverse aspects of artificial intelligence to tackle and advance, as I said before, some of the challenges to access information in colonial archives. So the project will have basically three main research areas. We are already working on the first one. And so this is handwritten text recognition. As historians can probably testify, one of the main difficulties or barriers in studying primary sources is paleography. It is a skill that might take not only years to develop, but it is also quite a time-consuming task, although it can be very rewarding too. In terms of what we are doing with it, you have probably heard or actually used already optical character recognition, or OCR. So this is basically a computational technique that allows you to transform an image into vectors, and in this particular case, characters. So this is the facility, for instance, that allows you to take a PDF and convert it into running text and put it for instance, into Word, right? And this works really well in modern languages and characters that are very much typeset, right? And the way that artificial intelligence does this is through machine learning algorithms as well, where you can teach the computer what a character looks like, and then it will attempt to recognize these same characters in samples that it hasn't seen before, right? Now, in the past few years, there have been substantial development on a technique that is parallel to OCR, but that focuses on transforming handwritten text into electronic text. This is what we call handwritten text recognition. And again, this is more easily said than done because there are a series of problems that are especially difficult with handwritten material. So just to begin with, there is enormous variability, for instance, between hands. It can be right. Not to mention that these technologies have been mainly developed for modern European languages, and definitely not for a combination, for instance, of 16th century Spanish and indigenous languages such as Nahuatl, Otomi, Zapotec, and so on, right? So in this project, what we are going to do is to teach the computer how the early colonial archive looks like, and hopefully by the end, we will have a series of models that can be used to achieve the automated or at least semi-automated transcription of historical primary sources that are relevant to Latin American studies. And so the second area that we will be working with is natural language processing, very much in the same fashion as I was telling you before. And what we will be doing in this particular project will be to continue to expand the work that we have already done in the Digging into Early Colonial Mexico project. We will expand in terms of the ontologies and the concepts to create annotated primary sources well beyond the Relaciones Geográficas. And of course, I need to say that for this, we will be working with the vast collection of the Lilas Benson, the Fondo Real de Cholula, as well, and material from the Archivo General de la Nación from Mexico too. And finally, the last area of research for the project, and this is probably the most experimental one, will be to attempt to teach the computer how to automatically or semi-automatically recognize elements in important pictorial documents. And this includes the maps of the Relaciones Geográficas, of course, and the vast fondo of maps and images from AGN too. And so in this particular case, what we are aiming to achieve is to help the researcher in the process of the identification of things like toponyms and symbols, among many others. And the idea behind it is quite similar with what we do with text, but will be also to expedite basically research with images. So say you are looking for a specific toponym, and imagine that you can ask the computer to identify in all pictorial images, such as codices, maps and pictorial documents, where the toponym of Chilapan, for instance, appears, right? Just to say something. And from there, we can also augment these with all sorts of contextual information. So imagine that we can do that, but we can also connect the data set of the historical gazetteer, right? So you will have very much augmented information on that specific place that you are looking for, right? So the potential is great, but we are just starting with it, and we will let you know how it goes. We are now at the moment preparing our website, and it will be live soon. So hopefully we can tweet it out, and you can visit that specifically, and see more information on it too. And so I also just want to leave you with a couple of resources that we have created for public engagement. And there are two story maps, one dedicated more to the historical aspect of Mesoamerica and colonial geographies, and another that we just finished, and that basically explains a bit more in detail the process of the creation of the gazetteer. And I'll share this in a second, just in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, but please feel free to contact me if you want to participate with us in the creation of these resources, and also with this research and so on. I am quite keen of sharing ideas, and obviously to share all these resources with you as well. And we will be also announcing with time a series of events and workshops in which we will teach this kind of technology and also how it works and so on. And finally, I just want, if Albert allows me, just to do a bit of shameless advertising. And that is about our MA in Digital Humanities at Lancaster, and of course our PhD program, because we recently opened some scholarships to international students, finally. So if you want to come to learn about all these things and so on, I'll be delighted to have you here. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Patricia. I always enjoy hearing what you're up to. You are so innovative. I'm really happy that you're able to share your research with us today. I want to open the floor, the metaphorical floor, up for our audience to pose any questions to our speaker. You can use the QA function, or you can place it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question to Dr. Murrieta-Flores. I see that we do have one on the question and answer. Lydia Carlillo has asked, quote, is there a way to be involved with the project? I'm only a master's student, but I'm really interested in being part of it or having more information. This is fantastic work, and I'm so excited about it.
Oh, thank you, Lydia. That's very kind. And yes, of course. If you send me an email, we can have a chat about it, and we can just talk about in which capacity would you like to be involved and so on. There are so many aspects anyway that we need fresh eyes, and I will be just delighted to have you.
We have some thank yous on the chat. Muchas gracias por venir, José Luis Lara. Y si hay cualquier pregunta, por favor, déjenos saber. Any other questions from the audience? I'm still learning a lot from you, Patricia. So I'm going to save my questions into our 101 so that I can nerd out with you as we develop this project. But we're really excited to partner up with Dr. Murrieta-Flores, on this new AHRC and NEH grant for the next 3 years. So we're super excited to not only explore these tools, but then also be able to make the Benson Latin American collections and the Fondo Real de Cholula collections more accessible to you all. And as Dr. Murrieta said, it's a collaborative effort, right? We welcome as many participants as possible. So feel free to email us if you're interested in participating in this type of work. We can use all the help we can get.
We will also have a bunch of workshops too. So
yes.
I think, you can participate as well. And it will be at an entry level too. So we will, be gentle in terms of the technology and so on.
Tengo una pregunta, ¿van a publicar esta conferencia en alguna red social o plataforma? Sí, vamos a, la presentación que se ha estado grabando al momento, vamos a publicarla por YouTube y vamos a distribuirla más ampliamente. Entonces, ahí les mandamos el link para que lo puedan distribuir a sus contactos.
Gracias, Carl. Gracias a todos. Thanks to all.
¿Otras preguntas? ¿Otras respuestas?
También.
So you said that you're planning on publishing out everything in this fall, right? That's a goal. This is going to be an extraordinary resource. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, so we have a GitHub repository. So everything will be available there. It will be connected to our website. So, we can, you can download, you will be able to download all the information there. But also, for instance, our database will be also open and available. And for that, what we are aiming to have is basically a facility where you can search any place name that you might, want to find about. And so you can search by state, you can search by region as well. So we have a little map display that shows you the different, areas and so on. So you will be able also to extract that information from the database, export it basically into a CSV file. So for a spreadsheet, for instance, but also in JSON format. So if you want to import these into other things, more computational stuff, it will be available. We are also thinking whether we could just have the facility of an API too, so people can also, do all sorts of computational stuff with it, but we are working still on that. So, yeah.
Excellent. We do have another question from Diana. Buenos días. ¿Hay fechas de los workshops donde podremos checar la información sobre estas actividades? Me emociona muchísimo poder aprender a usar esta tecnología en mi investigación.
Ah, qué bien. Todavía no, Diana. Apenas estamos empezando, entonces apenas estamos organizando todo el rollo, pero bueno, por supuesto que en cuanto las tengamos, ¿no? Las vamos a publicitar por todos lados. Y bueno, ojalá te podamos ver ahí, ¿no?
Y yo personalmente te mando un correo, Diana, para cuando ya tengamos ese plan. Ahorita estamos, ojalá vamos a poder tenerlas en el verano, entonces de ahí te mando un mensaje con esa información.
So another thing that I just forgot to add to that was precisely where you can find the resources, right? So let me just, sorry, I'm just opening the GitHub that we have. And so I can share with you there the actual channel that we have. And also 2 resources, right? So most of the resources are not there yet because we are, just finishing up and wrapping everything up. But at least the corpus, you can certainly find it there. So if you open the machine-ready corpus, it is already there, right? So let me just copy paste that. And I'm going to share as well the two story maps that I was telling you about before I forget. And so the first one is basically just a little engagement resource that you can use for teaching, or just it's very simple. The actual information is not anything out of this world, but it's very interesting information in terms of toponyms and historical geography and so on. And then the second one is the story map about the digging to early colonial Mexico gazetteer and how we created. And so that's there. And the GitHub, if you go to the DCM corpus section, you will be able to find there La Suma de la Visita de los Pueblos, and also all the Relaciones already clean in terms of just machine-ready text, right? And then at the end of the year, we will have everything there. So we will have all the GIS data set. We will have these connected as well with the geographical text analysis software, and also with the database too. So everything will be connected, but this will be kind of like your main to-go resource to get all the information that you want, basically from the project.
Excellent, thank you. I do have a question from Lisa Lizondo. What are your recommendations for beginners? I would love to use natural language processing with my material.
Let me think about this. Probably what I would say is go to something like Recogito. So there is this, fantastic Recogito. I'm just going to put the name here. So this is a fantastic spatial humanities project that was developed by a series of fantastic colleagues, and they ended up creating this amazing software called Recogito, where now you can input things like a text, for instance, and run name entity recognition through it. So it can basically identify places, people, dates, and institutions. And I will say just to start there, because that way you will sort of see what exactly this kind of natural language processing thing does, and whether it is exactly what you want and for you, and then start building up from there. I think having just a very simple and great example to begin with is the place to start, and then as you get excited about what you see, then you start delving into the whole thing.
We have another question from Estela. Oh, sorry. I think somebody wants to speak. Yeah. Okay, maybe it was my own feedback. The other question we have from Estela Solis is, where can we start studying about geographical text analysis in Mexico? I guess you have any other recommendations or maybe readings you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, geographical text analysis is basically this methodology that we develop at Lancaster. So the majority of readings that you can basically do behind that, we have them, and I can share with you my academia profile, and in there I tend to put everything there. So you can basically find there all the publications that we have done on geographical text analysis. Also have a look at Ian's Gregory profile too. Ian is my co-director here in Digital Humanities, and we developed together all these, and also with other people too. This is, a collective effort anyway, but we have published quite substantially about this and so on. And again, if you want something more specifically related, for instance, to Mexico, just send me an email and I will, kind of like point you in the right direction and so on, because we have papers, for instance, that we haven't published yet. They are in press, but I will be happy to share them with you.
Thank you. We do have on the chat here, Carl quote, we at World Historical Gazetteer hope to index the 16th century gazetteer data one day before long, linking back to its full rich records. Carl, would you be able to paste in the chat maybe the link to the World Historical Gazetteer? We've had the pleasure here at Lilas Benson to collaborate with Carl as well as some partners in Argentina to work on historical gazetteer that was published in the 18th century. And that's also increasingly becoming a very rich resource for Latin American geographic information.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And yes, Carl, we basically decided to do this. We were thinking before on putting, like all the information on the Alexandria data model, but we ended up deciding that we were going to follow your lead precisely, Carl, and go for the linked places format. So we are doing that so we can, make our lives easier and just put it into the World Historical Gazetteer as soon as it's ready, which will be quite soon now.
Thank you, Carl, for sharing that. Diana González mentioned or asked, ¿podrías repetir la recomendación para los principiantes, por favor?
Yes, I'm going to just paste actually, just a second. I'm just going to paste the actual link to that. Right, Diana. So this is an online platform. But it's also an open source software that you can download. Well, it's more difficult, but you can use it online anyway. And with it, what you can do is to put your text on it and run a natural language processing task that is called named entity recognition. So you run something called named entity recognition. And from that, what it will do is basically to identify proper names, specifically in your text. And you can actually see, I can't see the links. Oh, right. I'm not quite sure. I'm, to all panelists, sorry. I think I'm being silly. And instead of sharing to everyone, I'm sharing just to the panelists. So just to Albert. Hashtag Digital Humanities. Oh, wait, just a second. Right. So, can you see that now?
Yes, I see recognido.
Right. Excellent. So that. Oh, sorry. I shared that again. I didn't mean to do that. I'm just going to share then. I don't want to do that. Right. So I'm just going to share again everything that I said. Okay, sorry about that. Right. So this is the first one and the second one are the story maps. The next one is the GitHub repository. The next one is my academia page. And Recogito we shared already, yes.
One thing I do want to point out for you that are interested in Recogito, we're actually leading a workshop with UTEP, the University of Texas El Paso, this Friday morning. I'm going to share the link here. If you're interested, you can register for it. We're also doing another workshop for Onodo, which is social network visualization platforms, and then also ArcGIS. We're going to be doing one for that. So feel free to register there. There's limited seating. If you're interested, go ahead and sign up for one of the events. So a little bit of shameless plugging because I see that there's a lot of interest in Recogito here. It's going to be introductory, so don't set your expectations too high, but we'll show you at least how to input the text and how to start tagging within that tool.
And as I said before, we have, well, this year, for instance, we couldn't run the summer school. We also run a summer school here at Lancaster on geographic information systems, where we normally teach as well geographical text analysis and so on, but because of the pandemic and so on, we couldn't. But we are hoping to resume next year if possible with it. So we will be, advertising that as well too.
Any other questions? Right now is the moment for us to do all the shameful plugging that we need. So if you have any related events to colonial Mexico or New Spain, please feel free to share it with us in the chat. Yes, and we're really excited to partner with UTEP in not only the exhibition that I mentioned earlier, I'll go ahead and paste that information here, but then also in Wednesday, we're going to be having panels with research panels from students not only at the University of Texas, but also at University of Texas El Paso, as well as scholars from Virginia Tech, Mexico, and here at Texas Austin as well. So please join us. You can go ahead and register there. And hopefully we can see you Wednesday as well. And again, the workshops will take place this Friday. You can also register through that link that I submitted earlier. And hopefully we can see some of you there. Any other questions for Dr. Murrieta-Flores? Well, as I mentioned, we will be sharing this recording through our YouTube page. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today and learning more about Dr. Murrieta-Flores' work. And you can always contact me if you need more information, or is it okay with you, Patricia, if I share your email too? Okay, then I'll go.
Yes, no problem whatsoever.
And also please let us know if you're interested, in the project. Alrighty. Well, thank you again for joining us. We'll go ahead and close the session. And thank you again, Patricia.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.